Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage PCG Chairman Julie Stewart.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to St Luke's LSO on our special day. And may I take this opportunity to give you all my very best wishes on National Freelancers Day. My name is Julie Stewart, and I'm exceptionally proud to be Chairman of PCG, the UK's largest organisation representing many of the 1.72 million freelancers on these islands. When I was elected in May, I described my initial reaction as elation and disbelief. This was followed by mild panic, and as the weeks turned into months, a great sense of pride. Proud to be Chairman of PCG, representing a diverse community that contributed 95 billion to the UK economy in 2013 alone. I was there when PCG was born. I have seen it develop. I have seen it mature. We did a lot of screaming and shouting in the early days. On occasions, we threw the dummy out of the pram, jumped up and down, went off into a strop, or stormed off in a huff. And that was just the directors at last week's board meeting. No, we have matured. Our voice is more measured. We try not to shout when we sit round the table with ministers, HMRC, the Treasury, and civil servants. From the judicial review in 2001, through the Arctic Systems High Court battle in 2007, culminating in moving to offices in the heart of Westminster early this year, and regularly talking with politicians. Mind you, we can't always guarantee that they're listening. So yes, we have grown up. We are responsible. When you consider that since 2004, there has been a 63% rise in the number of freelancers in the UK, you get a real idea of the growth in this sector. You get a real idea of the numbers that we're responsible for. At PCG, we see ourselves as a champion of the men and the women, young and old, budding entrepreneurs, those starting a one-man or one-woman business, or hoping to develop a small and medium enterprise. As chairman of PCG, my commitment to this 1.72 million flexible workforce is that PCG will continue to grow, continue to be the voice of freelancing, and a voice that commands respect. We are proud of our past and confident of our future. The world of employment changes at an incredible rate. Our parents could not imagine today's employment landscape, and our children will no doubt inherit a completely different one as they face different work and lifestyle choices. In fact, research has shown that in the last 2 years, the number of freelancers under the age of 29 has increased by 24%. Our theme for this year's National Freelancers Day is ability, aptitude, agility. 3 words that we believe defines the very DNA of a freelancer. Ability. From finance, oil and gas, management, health, IT and the media, the freelance army provides specialist services throughout the UK in a variety of disciplines, sectors and roles. They provide the knowledge, skill and expertise. In fact, in tribute to National Freelancers Day, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, said only this week, our country owes a huge debt of gratitude to the thousands of men and women who have decided to make their living as freelancers and entrepreneurs. You have not only taken your own future into your own hands, but you are the engine of our economy and economic revival. Indeed, SMEs are the very lifeblood of our country and of local communities across the land. Aptitude. Freelancers are being called into boardrooms, offices, factories, oil rigs and service centres to unlock problems, find solutions and provide answers to a host of PLCs, FTSE 500 companies and national and local government departments throughout the UK. Businesses value freelancers. 87% of small and medium enterprises and 77% of large firms believe freelancers add value to the economy. Agility. From the oil terminals of Sullenvoe to the IT hubs of Britain's banks to Westminster corridors of power, freelancers are the talent tap that can be turned off and on when and where they are needed. And over half of the small and medium enterprises and large firms who engage those freelancers identified that flexibility and agility, managing peaks and troughs in demand and securing access to diverse talent as key means through which freelancers add value to their business. Tonight, we introduce the Freelance A-Team, the A-Team helping the UK grow. Those of you who remember the A-Team on television may remember their great catchphrase was, "I love it when a plan comes together." To ensure tonight's plan comes together, may I welcome one of the UK's most respected and favourite freelancers and a great friend of PCG, our host for the evening, Sue Lawley.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's great to be back for my fourth National Freelancers Day. Always good for a freelance to be invited back. We're such tender flowers, aren't we? We worry ourselves sick about how much to charge for our services, and then we go out and we give it our all, and then we sort of tremble and get all worried because we're not going to be invited back again and they hire somebody else. It's a very emotional business out in the independent sector. Mind you, it's obvious that more and more people are thinking of turning freelance, tempted, no doubt, by the heady excitement of uncertainty. I think we catch it when we fly Ryanair. It obviously is catching. I mean, half the people of Scotland now want to be independent. Just think of it. A whole country, a whole nation of freelancers just over the border. Sometimes, though, I do worry if the freelance game is worth the candle. Of course, to be really rich in Britain today, you have to work for the BBC. Correction, to be really, really rich, you have to stop working for the BBC. And let them put the figure on your payoff check. As a journalist, I worry a lot about the freedom of the press, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of celebrities. Or, of course, the freedom to reveal secrets. I thought WikiLeaks were a kind of vegetable until I read The Guardian. And fancy the Americans snooping on Mrs. Merkel's phone calls. I guess they wanted to find out where she bought her frocks. Anyway, sometimes I think there's only one thing for it, and that's turn to drugs. At least that way, I may get to be chairman of the cooperative bank. Or indeed, Mayor of Toronto. But why give up when we've got the PCG to support us? And the PCG, which is going from strength to strength. They've got new offices in Victoria, a new chair in Julie, you've just heard from, a new CEO in Chris Bryce. We've seen him somewhere before, but anyway, that's something else. They've got a new look newspaper, Freelancing Matters, which in its latest edition features the new ambassador for PCG, the alluring and very alluring, actually, and very clever Rachel Riley. And as for National Freelancers Day 2013, we've got a top-class panel waiting to answer your questions this evening. They include two fearless journalists, a consumer affairs guru, who actually, come to think of it, is also a fearless journalist, a rising star in government ranks, and a businesswoman who's star of television and the world of football as well. We'll meet them all in a minute. But we also have, I should say, because there are people watching online, we have a very strong audience here in LSO St Luke's, in London EC. They're bursting with questions. and that's a threat, not a promise. And we also have an audience watching us, as I say, online. From the Isle of Skye to the Isle of Wight, we have freelancers of all ages and all disciplines. And after that ringing endorsement duly read out to us from David Cameron, I suspect number 10's on the line as well. First, let me introduce you to a broadcaster, a journalist, and a writer who's become something of a consumer affairs guru. Oh, somebody's walking out. Have we bored them already? In her time, he's got a dinner engagement, I can tell. In her time, she's managed a citizens' advice bureau. She's produced radio education programs, and she's written books. She's one of the presenters of Radio 4's You and Yours program. She specializes in personal finance and small business. She is a true freelancer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Liz Barclay. Down the other end. I see, actually, Liz, that you've also written books on Philip Green and Duncan Bannatyne, with or without their permission, I wonder. Without their permission. So what have you've analysed the way in which they operate in business terms, have you? And so if you had to endorse one of their modus operandi, which one would you endorse?
I like them both. I think they've both got really interesting insights into business, but I certainly, having had a 15-minute interview with Philip Green that went on for 45 minutes before he said, "I've given you far too much time already," and then proceeded to give me another 45 minutes. I think that he is a very generous person who is very good at sharing his insights. And what struck me was that he feels that in business, he has to care about the whole of the business from the one end of the supply chain to the other. So it's not just about his consumers and his coffers, it's actually about his suppliers. And I think that was a very important insight from me.
You mean he's a control freak?
You could say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Probably the best business people are. We'll come to that. Next, a rising star on the government benches with a background in management consultancy. He turned to politics, working for, among others, William Hague, whom he helped prepare for Question Time when William was leader. And then later on he worked for David Cameron on policy review. He finally became an MP himself at the last election. He's against same-sex marriage. He believes in improving the NHS, analysing the deeper causes of rioting on our streets and reducing unnecessary bureaucracy for small businesses. Why isn't he Prime Minister, we ask? He's certainly a man to watch. He's currently PPS to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Glen. The rose among many thorns. John, you were head boy, you were president of your JCR at Oxford, you're a historian who knows how to run a business, you work for Accenture, you've been called a full spectrum conservative. Do you see yourself as Prime Minister one day?
I think that would be a very, very long way off, but you never know in politics. It's not in our control. You go into politics because you believe in public service, you believe in helping people, and then people decide as you go through it. That's my experience. So I don't wake up in the morning and think, am I one step closer? I just do the job I've been asked to do.
But we noticed you didn't say no.
Well, it would be silly to do that.
I wonder if my next guest would agree with that kind of observation on John Glen. Her opinion would certainly be worth knowing. As political editor for the Sunday Times, she's interviewed most of the cabinet and its shadow. She's one of the most authoritative voices on Westminster. It was she who single-handedly exposed the Chris Huhne speeding point scandal. Though, to be fair, she did have a little help from his wife, Vicky Price. She's about to give up her job, and guess what? She's going freelance in order to co-author the biography of David Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Isabel Oakeshott. You are the same, Isabel. Isabel, do you agree that John Glen is a man to watch? I'm trying to make a story here this evening.
Well, what was going through my head when he answered your question about whether he could see himself as a future Prime Minister was, that's a non-denial.
Exactly.
You get various versions of that from politicians. That was definitely, he has his sights on the top.
I thought so. And just one personal question to you. You're giving up being political editor of the Sunday Times after 8 years in the job?
Yes, 8 years with the Sunday Times, yeah.
You've said that it's one of the best jobs in Westminster. Why are you giving it up?
Well, I got an extraordinarily tempting offer to go and write the biography of the Prime Minister.
But you've written books while you've been political editor before. Why couldn't you do this one and keep
I
the
think
job
this
going?
is a book that's going to be an incredibly onerous project. It should be very fulfilling, but it's going to be an awful lot of hard work. And I also have 3 children, so what Karren was talking about really resonated with me in terms of managing that juggle.
You need a wife, yeah.
I've thought that so many times.
So have I. All my life, all my career, I've thought what I need is a wife. You get all these men who turn up, absolutely dressed to perfection. Somebody else has ironed the shirts and paired their socks. This is the great job. Finally, a radio broadcaster who might have been mayor of London, but he didn't want to desert his listeners or his pay packet. That's his joke, actually. I was free to. Born of a family steeped in journalism, this man has worked for the Sunday Mirror, the Sun, the News of the World, the Daily Mirror. He also helped set up Sky News. But these days, he's a weekday fixture on LBC, where his phone-in breakfast show has a habit of breaking stories, not least because he has a regular weekly session with Nick Clegg. He is the only broadcaster I know to have sort of scored a coup by booking Nick Clegg as an interviewee. But actually, one of the reasons it works is because, of course, the listeners ask the questions. And as we know, listeners are brilliant at asking the best questions, far better questions than we interviewers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the irreverent, the charismatic, the controversial, the deeply self-effacing Nick Ferrari.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Now, what we want to know is whether you really considered standing for mayor or whether that was just a bit of a plaything.
Oh, no, I'd have loved to do it. No, I had heaps of great ideas, but it wasn't to be. And then the minute that the blonde bombshell entered, then it was game over. I was never going to
I was going to say, yeah, you had to recognise Boris was the better man.
Oh, absolutely. And he's had even more women than I have, as we're talking about wives, so you just have to accept it, really, don't you? So he had more voters.
Okay, to questions from the audience. We've got several microphones around the room, 3 at least. So we've got plenty of flexibility. What I'd like to do is to choose 2 questions, so we don't do too much waiting around. And can I ask you, when you put your question, just to tell us your name and who you are or what you do, so we get a handle on you before we answer your question. Questions, please. Myriads of hands go into the air. Here's one we'll start with, lady with the red hair, and then we'll come to the gentleman back there. If you could stand by with the microphone for that one there. Lovely, thank you. Yes.
Evening. I'm Hayley Connick and I'm the country manager for Elance in the UK. And I was wondering whether the panel agreed with George Osborne at the Conservative Party conference when he said that the Conservatives are the party of small business, and whether you thought that was true for small business but also for freelancers.
John Glen.
Well, of course, I agree with everything George says. I try to. I think that the truth of the statement is obviously from our record in government and throughout the 80s and 90s, when we actually did so much to make the case and change the culture of the country to say that actually the aspiration to set up your small business, to grow a business, to employ people is one that you should cherish. And I think that that's true in government latterly. The reality is, though, that I think over half a generation of a Labour government, that became more difficult, that there were more rules, more bureaucracies, more bright ideas from Westminster that said, well, actually, it would be a good thing if these rights are enshrined in law and these responsibilities were given to employers. And I think that's a dangerous route to go down. And I know, growing up in a small business, that things changed over the 20 years that I saw my father's business grow and then flounder, really, with all of those regulations. So I think it's a challenge now to unpick some of that when everyone expects a lot more assurance. The reality is that building a small business You want to have as little intervention and responsibility put on you by the government. And actually, if you look after your employees well, off your own back because it's the right thing to do, the business does well, you do well, and the employee does well. And I can never understand why we should be delivering social policy through small business leaders. So I think the intent is still there, although I think it's become a bit more complicated by the experience of coming after a Labour government and being in coalition.
Karren, you've lived and operated under both colours of government. What do you feel? Which one does better for small businesses and for large businesses indeed?
Well, I'm a huge admirer of George Osborne. I think the job that he's done in the last 3 years in sorting out the economic mess left by the Labour Party has been phenomenal, particularly when you look around the rest of Europe and see how they're not coping so well. I think definitely when the Conservative Party say they are for hard-working people, they genuinely mean it. And I think that's a very impressive thought. And they're thinking all the time about ways in which they can improve people's lives. And I think in terms of running a small business, as John said, it is about less regulation, more independence, more help, easier access to money, all of the things they're trying to fix. But it's also about recognition. Because one of the things, if you're a sole trader or a small business, is you are very lonely. It is a lonely place to be. And to know that someone recognises that, watches out for you and wants to help you and knows that you're a huge part of the reason why the economy is turning a corner, I think is very, very important.
Give us the political view as well.
Well, I think the reality is actually that none of the three main parties are the party of freelancers. They might go on a bit about small businesses, or a lot in the case of the Conservatives in particular, but in 10 years working at Westminster, and I talked to politicians from all the parties all day, every day, I was reflecting that I have never once heard a politician express any interest or concern for the needs of freelancers per se. And I think that is partly a responsibility for you in the audience here. I think you have to raise your game, really get yourselves onto the political agenda. I spoke to a couple of ministers yesterday in preparation for coming to this event, one Tory, one Lib Dem, and both quite senior figures. And on the Lib Dem side, didn't really know what to say to me about freelancers. On the Tory side, I would say if this was a little spot check, they did do better and they had some points to make about rollout of some of the things you're concerned, like rural broadband, for example. But still, it seems to me that this is a bit of a blind spot for all parties. And I think you have got to be a lot more pushy, shout a bit louder about what you're doing, and start getting politicians actually talking about you and your needs.
Do you want to come back on that? What do you think about what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that the PCG is a great voice because, as you say, as you've all said, small business, whether that's as a sole trader, as a freelancer, or as a small or micro business, it's a lonely game, and you can feel very isolated. And so, lobbying together and having an organisation that can bring your voice to the fore, I think, is really valuable. But yeah, I would agree that freelancers probably need to stick together a little bit more and to shout a little bit louder.
Well, what about you, Liz Barclay? I mean, it is extraordinary, really, isn't it? What's the contribution? 95 billion a year, I think, isn't it, that freelancers contribute to the economy. It's amazing that actually more notice isn't taken of them, isn't it?
It is and it isn't. I think that I agree with Isabel when she says that none of the three main parties are particularly for small business, simply because they don't see them, they don't hear them. And I think that was what happened when the Business Link disappeared, and there was nothing that really replaced it in terms of help for small business. Spoke volumes for me, because it is lonely out there, but people need a lot more practical assistance in terms of knowing where to turn to when they want to set up a small business, when they're growing a small business, when they're at various points in that small business, such as taking on employees. And
but what can the PCG do to make government take notice? We're all saying they don't take any notice and voices need to be louder. What should those voices be saying?
Well, what those voices should be saying is what the small businesses and the freelance people are saying out there. We have 5 million small businesses. Only 220,000 of those are represented by the Federation of Small Businesses. We have 1.75 million freelancers. Only about 20,000 are members of PCG. We need to be doing much more to appeal to the small business to get them to be part of the membership, because it's only with strength of numbers that they're going to hear and start to hear what is being said. What people are saying to me is there's still far, far too much red tape out there, and there isn't enough help available at a very, very practical level. And that's where we need to start.
Nick, have you ever heard the word freelance pass the lips of your friend Nick Clegg?
Yeah, he had to today because we put a question to him, and I don't think he particularly successfully answered it. But if we come back to, I think Karren's absolutely right. George Osborne has achieved a lot. Not least, we no longer have to listen to Ed Balls banging on all the time about the problems we're in, which is about as much fun as watching Joey Essex eat an ostrich penis in the jungle. So thank Christ we don't have to do that much more of that. But if we come back to, clearly the lady at the back light's watching that, if we come back to Hayley's question, actually, and it might be quite informative for the putative Prime Minister to my left, I'd like to ask you to throw the question back to you, if I may, through the chair, Sue.
You may.
And I'd like to ask you, if you think that the new government has been more helpful to freelancers, would you please raise your hands now if you think they have been more helpful than the previous administration? Precisely. Not a single hand goes up, Mr. Glen. And that is the grim reality, because all you say and all you do, and I'm sure you're well-intentioned, you achieve absolutely nothing. If I had any ounce of power, I would make everybody go freelance, because you would cure the problems of the NHS over bloody night, because we never go to hospital, we never go to doctors, because we can't bloody well afford to, and that's the truth.
Okay, I'm coming to my question over here, and can I have one on standby over here? Gentlemen there. If you stand by just there, I'll come to you later, sir. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Hadley, Director of Policy at the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. We're the professional body for the UK recruitment industry. Appreciated Karren's presentation, even though I'm a Villa fan, but it was very interesting. Very quick question in two parts. One is about, are we doing enough in this country to build a new generation of freelancers? So young people coming into the jobs market, are we doing enough in schools to develop that sort of resilience that we need to succeed in what is absolutely right, is a changing world of work? And then when people get into the world of work, are we doing enough, if you're working freelance, to create an environment that enables them to succeed, in particular linked to payment terms? So it's still the case, companies are paying 60, 90 days payment terms, which is a killer if you're in this sort of environment, and even if you're in a small business. So a question in two parts. It'd be very interesting to get the panel's
Two questions, I think. You
a question
snuck
in two
another
parts.
one in, but anyway, Liz Barclay.
No, absolutely not. We're not doing enough in schools, and we're not doing enough to help once people are in the workforce on a freelance basis. You mentioned payments in particular, and yes, I think your 60, 90 days are pretty far out these days. As the recession has gone on, some businesses have tended to use the small business and the freelance as their credit line. And obviously that's not what we want to see. We really, really do need to change that, because an awful lot of small businesses struggle at that point in time. And when I say small businesses, I mean sole traders, I mean freelancers running their own little operations. But we need to start much, much earlier. Now, it's all very well, we say the same about personal finance, we say the same about lots of skills in schools, and we're pushing an awful lot onto the teachers. But there are ways of teaching entrepreneurship and enterprise skills in schools, and I've done quite a lot of that in Scotland, and they're much more keen on it in Scotland, where school children as young as 7 run their own businesses and their own shops, and really come out understanding not only how the world works in a better way, but also that it is an option for them. And an awful lot of young people coming out of universities haven't realised up until now that it was an option for them. Now a lot of them are being forced to accept it as an option simply because the jobs aren't there. But it's too late because the enterprise skills haven't been built into the system.
Karren,
so yes, we need to do more.
You do get the impression on that some of the apprentices, you know, and they're very, as we know, wet behind the ears, and they're not long out of school, that they've just never been given any kind of education in the basic ways of running a business, of even being sensible, frankly. I think I'm trying to criticise the apprentices, but you get my drift.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that. I think it's an interesting term, freelancing. And what does it mean as a business if I was to take someone on a freelance basis? Is it a consultant? Are you there for a job? Is it agility, speed to market, flexibility? And I think that might be something that you may want to focus on in that respect, because if you are a small business and you do want to go to the next level, sometimes you do need a short-term resource that helps you grow.
Do you think...
And it's sometimes the best way to get it is from the people in this room. And I wonder whether small businesses don't understand that, being small businesses themselves.
Do you think the terminology is wrong? I mean, we've already heard so many different terms. Freelance, contractor,
Sole
independent
trader.
professional, sole trader, small business.
Yeah.
You know, there's a kind of crossover there, and they are different, whether you're scheduled deal or whatever you are. Do you think one word?
I do, and I think the word I would be using is independent. Because I think it's a really important word if you're a business, to have someone who has an independent skill that they can contribute to your business and then exit to on to the next business, I think would be incredibly valuable for people to realise the potential of that.
It's a debate worth having. I mean, I know we have on the front row here the Chief Executive, Chris Bryce of PCG. Now, PCG, I mean, it is difficult, Chris, isn't it? I mean, we have NFD, which is today, you know, and then you say PCG, Private Contractors Group. I mean, it's awkward.
It is awkward.
Can we have a microphone here? This yellow one? Try again.
Yeah, it is awkward. So, when we were first formed, we were ir35engineers.com. We then moved to PCG, Professional Contractors Group. It arose by any other name, of course, but it is a real identity crisis for us, and I think independent. I like that, Karren, and I think you said independent professional. I quite like that, but of course it's not up to me; it's up to the board.
But it's a debate worth having, is what you're agreeing. I mean, I know we've talked about it in the past, and it does, you know, raise its head each year, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Oh, yellow one, thank you.
It's a hardy perennial, yes.
Okay, right, well, we've focused them up then. Let's have another question. We're going to go over here, and we'll have a question standing by just there. Gentleman in the yellow tie.
Thank you. David Caro, President of the European Small Business Alliance. We represent the interests of 1.3 million small businesses throughout Europe in Brussels. First, I'd like to say it's good to see Karren's move to a claret and blue team. I'm another Villa supporter. I'd like to ask the panel what they think, with an eye to the debate of in-out of Europe, what they think the effects on small businesses would be of a withdrawal from Europe of the UK.
John Glen.
Well, I think the issue is more, where could we get to in terms of a reformed EU? Because until we know what that is...
No, don't change the question.
Well, I mean, I think we don't have... See, the trouble is we don't really have that question on the table, so it's a very hypothetical one. I think a lot of people...
We do have that question, it's just been put on the table.
Well, I think a lot of people would like to think that it would be the land of milk and honey and loads of great opportunities and would free us from lots of bureaucracy. But I'm not so sure that would actually transpire. We do a lot of our business with Europe, and they treat us in a certain way because we're part of the club. And we've got to be really clear about the proposition that we would really be taking on. So I look forward to a situation where we can see that choice and really know what the outcome would be. But I'm a little bit nervous about some of the sort of populist rhetoric that I sometimes hear from people to my right, that sort of says simplifies.
Excellent.
And I mean, whilst I've got the microphone, you know, I'm a little bit sceptical too about it being government's job to launch to the next group of business leaders. I'm sure when Karren was aged 23 in 1993, she wasn't thinking of ringing up Business Link. You know, actually, it takes drive, leadership, determination, some of those qualities. Yes, you've got things like the Young Enterprise Scheme. Yes, we've got financial education in school. But it is about a cultural shift and a change of expectations across society. We know you won't have a job for life And now we've got to change the mindset into freelancing.
Let's just stay focused on Europe for a bit. Let's find out what Nick's been saying about Europe. Then you've been saying pull out, it's all going to be great.
Well, no, I've been
without
saying give everyone a choice. In reality, as well, I think we're old enough and grown up enough. We should be allowed to have a vote, and it's extraordinary. And we clearly have got a future Prime Minister because he's swallowed the dictionary and he's finding every possible way that he can use words to ensure we don't get that vote. If we come back, I mean,
I'm here tomorrow to make sure that we do have a referendum. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to give the country.
Well, it wouldn't harm to make it happen a little bit earlier for us. If we come back, I was pushed kicking and screaming into being a freelance, right? I'd worked about 15 plus years for a couple of organisations, the Daily Mirror Group and Rupert Murdoch, and I really didn't want to be a freelance. And as with many things in my life, I had got it completely bloody wrong. It is fantastic. My late dad was a freelance, and what I've learnt about freelancers is that, and when I did some prep for this, we don't like petty fogging bureaucracy. We don't like red tape. We are the wealth creators, as the Conservative Party does actually acknowledge, I will say that. We are the people who go out. We are the people who create the firms, create the jobs, and get going. And as I understand it, unfortunately, the industry in which I work, I'm not actually have much to do with Europe, but I would have thought if I was running some of the companies that I sense you do, Europe is nothing but another burden on your shoulders. It is possibly a market, but I think looking around the room, you are old enough and grown up enough to have the vote that his party go out of their way to refuse you to have. That's what I think.
Well, I'm going to come back to Isabel in a minute, but I just want to find out where our questioner is coming from on this. I mean, do you think it would be better out than in, considering that you work out of Brussels?
Absolutely not. I think it's so important that we have the widest market possible. Certainly, I agree there are things that we should renegotiate and look at, cut the bureaucracy, but I think it's vital that we stay in Europe. It is our biggest market.
Yeah. David, can I ask you one thing? I don't know about your company. If you hadn't had your books audited for 12 years, would you still be in business?
These are some of the things
precisely.
that need to be
checked. And yet we accept it with the European Union. It's bloody great, isn't it?
But I would add to that I do have my own business apart from the lobbying I do.
Sir. Credit to you.
My business is in the automotive industry, and I could see the automotive industry being seriously damaged if we do withdraw from Europe. And that would have a huge effect on a lot of small and micro businesses throughout the country.
Isabel.
Well, I'm going to do something unusual and stand up for John here.
Make the most of it, John.
Nick, I think you're being over harsh here, because the reason, as John was saying, that he and all his Tory colleagues are stuck in London tonight is that they're all being on a 3-line whip to be in Parliament tomorrow to vote on a backbench bill, which should, the idea is that it might lead to a referendum. Now, I hope to reassure you that I suspect that this will not actually happen. I think they're struggling to get it through, and I think it's going to be a very, very long time before there is any referendum. And if there is a referendum, I would put money now on a vote to stay in the EU. But I think it's unfair to sort of have a pop at him, saying that that his party is not.
He'll get used to it when he's in number 10. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm coming to our question here, and have I got one? Here, gentleman here.
Hello, my name's Chris Bell. I'm an independent professional, and I'm on the board of directors of PCG. And the question I'd like to pose is HS2. Should the country be investing in HS2, or should we be investing in rolling out broadband to the masses?
Karren.
I think HS2 is a fantastic idea, and I wish there were more infrastructure projects that were, self-financing. I think the runway at Heathrow would be one of those projects that could create jobs and wealth and easy transport. Those are things that we want. But actually, easy transport and easy communications are key to everybody who works independently. That you can get somewhere how you want, when you want, at a price you can afford, which is an important point, and also that you can communicate. I wouldn't like to think one had to compensate for the other, but both could be delivered.
Isabel.
I think that the handling of the HS2 project has been a complete and utter fiasco. Vast amounts of money have already been ploughed into it. And I don't think anyone in this room can be entirely confident that it is actually going to happen. I think the Prime Minister is personally very committed to it, as is the Transport Secretary, but it's increasingly doubtful whether Labour is going to sign up to it. I think it will be incredibly convenient for Ed Balls and Ed Miliband a few months out from the next election to suddenly find that they have a £50 billion pot of cash to spend on something else. So I think the idea was great, but I don't think that the project probably will not get off the ground, and on that basis they should have spent the money on something else.
Do you think, John Glen, it will get off the ground? So we've actually gone away from the question to discuss HS2, but it is quite riveting, and it is important for business after all. Will it get off the ground?
I think it will happen. I think the rationale for it is clear, that we do have a divide in this country between north and south. It says a lot about the commitment of this government to actually make those communications between the north and south of the country easier. I think Isabel's right that it could have been handled better. The case could have been made more clearly. But I think an infrastructure project of this size is going to be complicated. The trouble is that you can't just change the route at different points to accommodate different people's environmental concerns to every single degree, because it's obviously got to be direct enough to be fast enough to be worthwhile. But, I mean, I suspect if you look through history, big infrastructure projects like this wouldn't have happened if we'd have listened to everyone who said, not in my backyard. What we need to do is make sure that we get the best compensation arrangements in place for those people who will be affected and get on with it.
Do you think that the Labour Party will back off it?
Well, I think they're playing a political game at the moment, saying will we, won't we, to keep the pressure on. That's what oppositions tend to do.
But ultimately, what do you think?
Well, I can't see them really going against all those local authorities in the north, in Manchester particularly, who desperately want it.
Isabel seems to think they will.
Well, she's probably closer to the Labour Party than I am.
Nick, what's your view? You must have talked to your friend Mr. Clegg about all this.
Ceaselessly. If we come back to Chris's question, which is should the money go on broadband, I think it probably should, with the exception of the opportunity of seeing Karren sack one of the players and sell him to Crewe. I've never found anybody who wants to get to Birmingham 15 minutes quicker anyway. It's not as if the whole country is clamoring, I've got to get to Birmingham. And the whole idea was dreamt up really before we had laptops, iPads, or in the case of the former co-op chairman, ease and whiz to keep us going. So I don't really see the need. I would be very persuaded of your argument, Chris, to look at the possibility of broadband, to be truthful. You live in Crewe. And he was a shit player, wasn't he?
In fact, Chris, this is PCG policy, isn't it? I mean, no, seriously, to get some money moved over to rural broadband and the rolling out of broadband in those kinds of...
No, it's not official PCG policy, but, you know, we're trying to look at ways of oiling the wheels and enabling people to do business more efficiently and more flexibly. So I'm sort of in favour of both, actually. And
well,
I know
of course, we're all in favour of everything.
You know, but there was a commitment from the government to improve broadband on railway networks anyway. So I think it's a case of, you know, I like the idea of some of the investment, keep the politicians away from the project, because that's what will make it fail. And just let us get on with it and be a showcase for the entire world would be my suggestion.
Quick comment on it.
Yeah, I'd hate to have to choose, but if I had to, I'd go for broadband simply because I feel that we need the connectivity around the country. And if you see what happened in the Outer Islands in Scotland when Consumer Direct set up a phone direct service there and the regeneration that happened because people went home to live somewhere where they were now able to work, you can see what that could do for various pockets of the country. So if it came down to it, I'd go for broadband.
Okay, I'm coming to my question over here, and can I have one on standby over here? Oh, no, right, well, we'll wait for another one over this end. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I'm Peter Cameron, a economic consultant in the oil and gas industry. My question is about government's role as a contractor. Very, very approximately, government is about 50% of the economy. And so government can have a direct influence on small businesses and freelancers. It seems to me that the UK economy is largely a corporate economy, that government contracts tend to be let to big organisations, and it's down to the private big companies to sublet. I find it's much easier in Europe for small businesses and freelancers to get contracts. So my question is the government really serious about opening up its own contracting area for small businesses and freelancers?
I'm not sure who can answer that. It can only be John Glen.
Well, I think you've got a point to some degree, and there's certainly some industries where it doesn't work very well, and the defence industry probably being the main one. I think the intent's there, but the cost of servicing a large number of individual businesses, I think proves problematic. But I think that there are more and more opportunities as there try to be more transparency about contracts. And I work in DCLG, and I know that we've put a number of all the contracts out and all expenditures out there. So there's more of an opportunity for dialogue, and perhaps it starts in local authorities. But I think the bigger problem is about actually having government departments treating freelancers with consistency in terms of the tax treatment, and actually being clear about the value that you add. And I look at some of the decisions that have gone wrong in government over the last 3.5 years that I've had some sight of. And I think, gosh, if we actually could have brought in a bespoke resource at certain points for a short amount of time, rather than be worried about whether there was an adverse headline in the newspapers one day about their day rate aggregated up to a ridiculous annualized total, and we actually had the right person looking at the job, we'd have done a lot better. So I think your observations are correct. The government's got further to go, but the sympathy is there at this point.
Anyone else want to comment on it? Liz?
Just as a freelance bidding for a department which will remain nameless, a contract, the process is absolutely prohibitive for a single freelancer. Yeah. There is absolutely no way that you can physically, mentally, emotionally and intellectually bid for one of those contracts if you are a freelance. You would have to pay an inordinate amount of money for the consultancy that would allow you to make those kind of bids. We have got to make it much more simple.
And if you come back to one of, just briefly, Sue, very briefly, if you come back to one of Karren's key points, which was agility, and that's what you guys can do. In response to, Peter, your question about government contracts, I'll give you, it's a bit like countdown. Let me give you 2 letters and a number, G, 4 and S. And how they ever got that bloody Olympic contract is utterly beyond me, but they did, and that is symptomatic of where they get it wrong.
Good point.
Okay, we've got a couple of tweets on it. The twits are tweeting. Let's have one, yeah. Can you hold the microphone, because then you'll get it to your mouth better. That's it.
This has come from Janet Collins, who said, when will HMRC stop giving me endless red tape and forms to fill out and let me get on with my job?
Well, I don't know who answered that. I think we might all agree and move on, really. Absolutely. Okay, give us another one.
And from Rachel Headley, who said, I've just had a baby, but want to carry on working. Would freelancing help me balance my work and family life?
Well, Karren.
I think definitely. I mean, one of the things, you know, when I was having my children 17 years ago, phrases like flexible working, work-life balance, they hadn't been invented. And I think communication now has changed a lot of the way people work. And also, responsible employers want their workforce who are doing a good job to be able to work that around as much as they can, where it is at all possible to be flexible. But what we are seeing is people who don't want to work inflexible hours are setting up businesses from their kitchen dining tables, and they can now. They can with the internet, they can with the way they communicate. They can choose their independence to earn as much as they want on any scale that they want.
And they can stay in their dressing gowns till lunchtime.
And they can stay in their dressing gowns.
Yeah, exactly. Isabel, do you have, you've got 3 children?
Yeah, 3 aged 6 and under. It's no picnic. Of course, the answer to that tweet is absolutely. And in my industry, in the newspaper industry, there are frighteningly few women with multiple children who have staff jobs. And that is because staff jobs do not really allow for the extra pressures that you have as a mother. And so almost all women, once they have 1 or more children, choose to go freelance. And that is, I think, in my industry, which can be behind the curve in many ways, it's a mixed blessing. I think the newspaper industry still has a real problem with the way it treats freelancers. They're still undervalued, they can be exploited, they're underpaid, and in some cases they're not paid at all. So we as an industry have a lot of catching up to do on that front, but I think it can work, and we will have to adapt with the times.
Some interesting statistics, actually, the latest statistics prepared for PCG. Around 38% of freelancers are women, and in some industries, such as healthcare, this rises to 75%. And also the number of freelance mothers has increased in the last 2 years by 24%. It's a growing biz. Liz?
Just to add the caveat, absolutely, Rachel, go for it. If you've got the right attitude, the problem is it isn't for everybody, and some people really struggle with the isolation that can cause. So my only tip would be get a network around you somehow or other that you can tap into as and when you feel the motivation flying out the window and the desire to stay in bed rather than in your dressing gown.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Right, we're only in our dressing gowns at lunchtime, and I mean, I identify totally, because actually you get up and you get on and you keep thinking, well, I'll get dressed in a minute because what I look like doesn't matter, and you just keep doing things, and then you realise it. I just wanted to explain this.
It's called the radio in my case. It doesn't matter how I look, Sue. Never a problem.
Come on, I'm looking for a question. Any questions? Yeah, there we are, one at the back there. Can we have a microphone to the back? Thank you. Have I got one on this side? No question on this side.
Hello,
okay.
good evening, panel. My name's Bruce Nash. This question's actually for Karren, so forgive me, panel, and Sue.
Okay.
Really great presentation, very entertaining, as a good keynote speech should be. My question is this. Out of everything you've done, which is a lot, what has brought you the most happiness and you're most proud of? Thank you.
I'm most proud of, did you say?
Yeah, most proud.
I think over a career, it's very hard to pick one because there are certain key moments in all your life. You know, when I was 17, my ambition was to get heating in my house, you know, and I think it changes, and then to get a car, and when you achieve those things, there's hugely important milestones in your life. In recent years, I think the most important thing that myself and my team have achieved is taking on the legacy that will be the Olympic Stadium, and really ensuring that it delivers the community benefits, the jobs that it should do in the heart of East London. And it's a huge responsibility and one which we take incredibly seriously. So I'm really proud that we West Ham will have a huge say in what happens in that stadium and can, you know, really bring 1.2 million people to use that park, so it doesn't become this incredible white elephant it has across the country. But I think personally, I always say that nothing's work unless you'd rather be doing something else. And 24 years into my career, nothing else I'd rather be doing, and that's a huge achievement. If you can do the things that you love, you can keep variety, which is one of the great things about being an independent professional. That what happens as you get older is you can say no to more things. And you can get in a position where you can.
Not
really
when you're a freelance, you can't. It's
in
the DNA. You know, if you get offered a job, you take it.
Well, I think that's probably true in some levels, but some of my other colleagues on the panel are now deciding, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. I've had an opportunity to do this, and those are the things you spend a whole career working towards. Independence of choice.
I think that's right.
And it's a wonderful privilege when you achieve it.
And I think, you know, the thing that's indicative of that independence of choice, is it not, is that, you know, when you get up in the morning, are you pleased to be getting up and going out to do what you're doing? And if you're not, give it up, change it, do something else.
I'd just like to say I had 57 schools in my constituency, and I try and visit them on a sort of rolling basis. And the one bit of advice I give to the older children is to say to them, you need to find a job where you don't look at the watch.
Yeah.
Because you know, unless you've got that passion and for what you're doing, you'll find it very boring. But we do live in a world where you're expected, and it's normal for you to change jobs frequently. And I think, you know, reflecting on the earlier conversation, what we really need is freelancers to have that status that is equivalent to long-term employees, which I don't think we quite have yet.
But don't you feel it's moving that way? You know,
Yes, I do. I do think it's moving that way.
It's just a very long, slow process.
That's right. But I think when we get the argument right about the value both to the organisation and also to the individual, because people don't always want to do the same job forever. I was in consulting for over a decade, and I enjoyed moving around. Now, that was under the shelter of working in a big company, but actually having that flexibility is you know, increasingly attractive to young people, and the evidence.
Of course, and it's a generational thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, when I first started out in working life, people expected to be employed from the cradle to the grave, as Karren was saying, you know, whether you work for the BBC or British Telecom, you know, you got there and they looked after you forever and you went to the gold watch. Now it's kind of old hat. I mean, we
Unless
worry
you're Bruce Forsyth.
Well, exactly.
Keeps going forever, it would have been.
Yes, some people think he should perhaps see that stuff you get on the wall sometimes. But
No, just a quick appeal to John. When you are talking to your 57 schools and the school children, could you please say, look for work you'd like to do, not necessarily look for a job you'd like to do? Because we have to change this cultural mindset that says you have to have a job and be employed by someone else.
Very good point.
You can work at something you really enjoy in a different way.
I see that the twits are jumping up and down.
Yep.
Let's have one.
We got one that came in from Richard Cupland, and he said, which freelance industry will be the biggest in 10 years? He thinks it'll be engineering.
Anybody got a view?
No, but I would like to share with you one of the tweets that I got. When I arrived here tonight, I was really wowed by the venue and I took a really nice picture and it was all quite sexy and glamorous. And I was just saying, I'm here to speak at this thing tonight. And here's the reply from somebody called Miguelito. You'll be reassured to hear he only has 113 followers. He says, national free ? Never heard of it, #WTF.
Ugh.
So I think you have to raise your game.
Oh, I got a question over there, yeah.
Good evening, panel. My name's Ian Wood. I'm one of the board directors at PCG. I'd just like to ask, how do they think freelancers can best help small businesses to grow, please?
How did they say that again?
Sorry, how can freelancers best help small businesses to grow?
I think we've kind of been answering that, really, haven't we? But Liz, just do a quick
bringing
summary.
in all your aptitude and abilities, your experience, your knowledge, putting a fresh pair of eyes into the process. That's what we do, as flexibly as possible. And we learn every time we take on a contract, and we bring that learning to the next contract and the one after that. And I think that is our real added value.
It comes back to Karren's bullet points, doesn't it, I think? It's Ian, isn't it? Is it Ian, sir? Yeah. It comes back to Karren's, I think, 6 pretty accurate bullet points. And it also comes back to an earlier question, which I didn't actually talk to. It was Tom, I think, who talked about education over there somewhere, sir. And I think you're absolutely right. And credit to this MP who goes around those schools. That's fantastic. I wish that more constituency MPs were that engaged. But you should offer these children or young people, being a freelance is a fantastic opportunity. You are your own boss. You don't have to work to someone who's got a halitosis, dandruff and a beard, and that's just the women. You can do as you see fit. The world is your proverbial oyster, and you should really, really try and encourage that. And just coming back, Sue, I think in fairness you did make a point. I think we see too many people, again, not your constituency, I'm sure, John, but too many children do come out and they've been failed by an education system, not so much under these blokes, but under the previous blokes, where every year, miraculously, grades got better, every bloody year. Well, you all run businesses, life's not like that, and credit to this lot, they actually said, no, this is ridiculous. Every year children got brighter, every year children got more A's. What a load of bollocks. Well, now they've finally put that right. But what has to happen now, I think, is that we have to accept that really what Sue said, that too many children come out without a purpose. Very, very briefly, you'll appreciate this one very, very quickly, from a time when I was an employer, and I was running a very strange cable television station called Live TV on behalf of the Mirror Group. Yes, which is probably best forgotten. Such things as topless darts, the weather in Norwegian, and a rabbit that read the news. It was a very strange, very strange affair. And my late brother worked at the BBC, and indeed worked with Sue over a number of years. I know you were very friendly with my brother. And I used to have to interview all these people for jobs. And I just ran out of questions. And one day, honestly, he said, well, why don't you say what the BBC always say when they have a panel? Because the BBC panel, you don't just go for a job, there are about 5 people sit down and ask you what books you've read and Christ knows what else. And one of the closing questions at the BBC, which is quite a good one if you're interviewing people, is, what are you going to do if you don't get this job? And the applicant is meant to say, well, I'm going to learn from the experience. I'm going to improve my current affairs. I'm going to read books about American politics. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do whatever it might be. So I'm sat opposite this girl who we're trying to hire effectively just to present the sports bulletin, really. I mean, she was a pale shadow of what is and was, but that's the sort of girl we were looking for. She really belongs in The Only Way is Essex. Not Karren, but this girl I'm interviewing. Karren, of course, belongs where she's rightly is on The Apprentice. So this girl is, and we've really struggled. She doesn't read newspapers. She doesn't really watch television. She doesn't have interest in anything. She occasionally glances at Heat magazine. So I'm thinking, what the God's sake? So I come to the end and I say, well, tell me, whatever your name is, Sharon, nothing wrong with Sharon. Sharon, tell me, what are you going to do if you don't get this job? Using the BBC question, to which she said, well, my mum lives just round the corner. I think I'll go around there and have a cup of tea.
Very good. Oh, there we are. Yeah.
Hi, my name is James Collins. I'm a freelance IT specialist. We've already identified that freelancers, independent professionals have an image problem. And I wonder, most people that start a business that we think of, Alan Sugar, Richard Branson, create huge businesses. Well, freelancers, a lot of us start a business and stay small, and we're happy that way. So for each member of the panel, who should be our poster boy or poster girl that we can publicise and everyone can look up to?
Rachel Riley. Anybody got some ideas?
Rebecca Brooks. No, sorry, on you go.
A poster girl. Have you got anybody got a suggestion for a poster girl?
Well, just about any senior high-profile journalists are almost all freelance.
What about you?
I'm going for Jeremy Paxman. Why not? I'm sure he's freelance.
Well, I think it's interesting that we've had a lot of chatter around the media, and I think that it would be good to have people that actually go into businesses as consultants and turn them around. And I think there was Sir John Harvey Jones who had that programme that went in. Now I know he had a big job and all the rest of it before, but actually the principle of what he did, and back to the previous question, you know, freelancers don't bring overheads and they don't bring staleness, they bring the opposite. And so I think John Harvey Jones was a great figure who epitomised the spirit of what freelancing's about, which is
Jerry
saying,
Robinson did it as well, of course.
Yeah.
Jerry Robinson did it and did a very good programme on the NHS and how to turn it around. It's just they didn't take any notice of him. No. But he knew how to sort it out. It is true, actually. I mean, sometimes when people are choosing figureheads, they do immediately leap to television, as I say, the pursuit of celebrity. In a way, there are these wonderful people who run far deeper and have much greater knowledge and, dare we say, integrity about these things. And wouldn't it be wonderful to actually find somebody new and different rather than the usual rep company?
Anita Roddick was, I think, someone that you could probably learn a lot from. We were talking about when there was a great programme last year on BBC Two that would take two entrepreneurs. I don't know how many of you saw it. It ran on a Sunday night. It was about an hour. And they deliberately put opposing entrepreneurs. And there were some fascinating people there. I mean, there's a guy called Charlie Mullins who runs Pimlico Plumbers, right, who has done an extraordinary... I mean, he employs hundreds and hundreds of people by sheer hard work. And there's a lovely guy called Mark Constantine who runs something called Lush Cosmetics. Actually worked for Anita Roddick, strangely. And these people are phenomenal. They are employing, in Mark's case, people all around the bloody world, essentially just by making soap. I mean, it's fantastic. And the guy who runs Goo, what's the name of the guy? He's an absolute business genius. I mean, these are the people you look to. Phenomenal people.
And the boys who set up Innocent, actually.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question, because I think the question was if you are a sole trader, an independent professional, and you remain an independent professional and you don't want to employ 500 people, how do you communicate that? And I think what's a really interesting take on that is if you look in the creative industry, because if you're an artist and you've created a painting, or you're a writer who's done a book, you've put yourself out there with your talent, and somehow you've got into business, because that's the only way you can, because if people buy your creative work, then they're buying a part of you. And I think that might be a nice way to get that message across.
Okay, we're coming towards the end now. Oh, we've got I'll give a quick question here, yes, and then I'm going to go for a tweet and we'll finish. Yes.
Good evening, Adrian Stewart, Corns O'Hara Insurance Brokers in Manchester. We've been dealing with the freelance community for a long time. Just touching on how to promote. There's another gentleman in the audience here, James from Kingsbridge, and I noticed that James had tweeted the other day that he was one of the most important people in the insurance industry in the top 66. And I had something similar a few weeks ago. I was in the top 30, and we always have a little spar with each other. And we've done it from nothing, and we've sort of promoted ourselves using the cheapest channel going. And I don't think enough people use social media.
So I mean, let me ask you then, as a sort of ending roundup question, if you like. I mean, what would be your top 2 tips for a freelancer and how to operate, read a client?
Be yourself, use your own name. Don't use a company name, if possible. People buy people. They recognise you as an individual, and that needs to be done more. Social media is the very best channel to do it, I think.
Very good point. Thank you very much. Liz, top tip or 2?
It's really difficult to fit anything into a top tip because, you know, if you're not organised and you don't have finances organised, you don't have your cash flow sorted out so that you know who owes you what when, you aren't going to survive. So on the practical side, it's around about that. But I think you have to have some kind of unique selling point that really spells out who you are as much as anything else. And I like to think that, I mean, my motto is that I don't care what you know until I know that you care. So in other words, I won't go into any business to do any piece of work unless I absolutely am steeped in it and care about it, because I really do not think that anybody is going to take away from what I say anything that's important enough, you know, they're not going to treat it importantly enough if they don't understand that I really care. And I think that that is my, that's the way I approach everything. So if I'm not going to care about a piece of work, I don't take it on.
So you do your research before you go in, and you display when you get there that you know exactly what makes them tick.
And otherwise, why would, if I don't care about it, why would anybody pay me to help them to add value to their business?
And I think something that follows from that is then when you get in there, and if you've got that trust and you set up that good relationship, what you also do then is be very honest. Don't be the toady because they're paying you and say all the things that they want to hear. You know, what you say is what you really think, because you're bringing expertise to them, and you say, that's wrong.
But you can't do that and communicate that properly unless they know that you care, because it's the circular.
Isabel is gagging with a top tip, I can see.
Well, because I want to be a little bit more superficial about it, actually. That sounded really important and quite a little bit earnest. I would say that perhaps a key thing is to build up your own brand. And to do that, I think you should really exploit the media. You would be incredibly surprised actually how easy it is to get on TV and to get on the radio and to get your name in the paper for all the right reasons. You know, invest in a bit of media training. You would be amazed how often journalists are just gagging for an expert from the insurance industry, or pretty much anyone that we can describe as, you know, an expert in this or an expert in that. If you're on my phone and I've got your number, I will ring you up for a quote. So I think it's about putting yourself out there, and you will get extra profile from that, and from there that generates new business.
John?
I think it's 2 things. I think the first thing is to know, similar to Liz, to know what your distinctives are, what the unique contribution you can make. But I think secondly, and more importantly, is to know and understand the market that you can play in, because I think you need to think quite creatively about that market and the opportunities that exist, and you need to be able to match what you understand that you've got with the different niches of a marketplace that is more complicated than perhaps you think.
Karren?
Well, obviously all of those things is some great advice. You know, I think freelancers are liberating businesses from their internal resource. But it's important that you can convey the skills that you can fit in quickly, and that you can make a difference, and what your expertise are. And that is all about communication. It's taken for granted almost that you can write, but can you fit in? Can you make a difference? Do you care? I think all of those things are important.
Nick?
2 things, and I'm terribly sorry that all my stories are media related, but that's the only industry in which I've worked. Sometimes put yourself in the shoes of the man or woman who's hired you or contracted you or whatever it might be, so that if you're having a terrible problem in the past, I haven't had accounts paid, and I recall what it was like, and I would ring up and say, look, do you want to put it into the next month's, next quarter's, whatever. So sometimes perhaps be flexible there, a little bit of flexibility. and having sympathy for the boss, or whatever the title may be. And the other one I'm going to actually steal blatantly from Karren, which is the idea of agility and nimbleness, which I've made really watchwords for my entire lifestyle, as you can see sitting here tonight, as agile and nimble as I am. And that's how I close.
Brilliant. Look, we got a last tweet and that's it.
Yeah, we have. A bit of a cheeky one, but which do you think is better for British business, The Apprentice or Dragon's Den?
I'll give you a quick vote. Go on, Karren.
Well, I think there's no contest there.
Have you ever seen it, John?
Yeah, I've watched both several times. I suppose I find Dragon's Den a little bit simplistic, and I think that it's a bit unrealistic to evaluate a business that quickly. Whereas I like the sort of ongoing dynamics of relationships with the apprentice, which is more realistic.
You got his vote, Karren, and you have it even more now he's met you. Oh, right, okay. Well, you're there, all right then. Prime Minister, you may hang around. Isabel.
I'm going to sit on the fence and just say that I think they've both done an incredible service to the economy. If I had been able to watch programmes like that when I was at school, I might have thought about being an entrepreneur, and actually it was not something that ever even crossed my radar.
Liz?
I do agree with that, but I do think it's time they were both put out to grass and we had some new formats.
Nick, somebody's going to applaud. Nick?
Oh, come on, it's Strictly versus X Factor. It's Birmingham versus Crew. It has to be The Apprentice. There's no question about it in my mind.
Quite right. Panel, thank you very much indeed. It's been a gas. I hope you've all felt that they've displayed aptitude, ability, agility, all those other things. Of course they have. My thanks to them, my thanks to you for being a smashing audience. And before you leave this evening, let me hand you over to a man who is no stranger to this moment in the proceedings. Though in previous years, as I was indicating earlier, he's had a different title. He used to be the chairman, now he's the CEO. It's a funny way to go, that, really. Chris Bryce.
Two things before I start. The first thing will probably be a relief to many of the people I work with. I'm going to read from a script tonight for the first time. And the reason for that is I have a terribly sore throat, and I thought trying to concentrate on something smart to say and have a sore throat at the same time, I'm bound to do exactly what they're worried about. I'm sure you'll all join me in extending our huge thanks to the talented and ultra-accomplished Sue Lawley. As always, a remarkable job she's done for us, and a fantastic evening. Thank you, Sue. Ladies, gentlemen, old friends, hopefully some new friends, thanks for joining us tonight, and what a stunning venue. It's just a beautiful place to walk into, and I'm not surprised that Isabel was tweeting about it. As many of you know, I recently had my own "you're hired" moment when I was appointed CEO of PCG. Like the apprentice candidates, I was set a task. 6 months ago, I was asked to re-energize, reposition, and rearrange things at PCG. Well, it's still fairly early on that journey. Much has been achieved, thanks to fantastic staff. And I was delighted when I was invited back into the boardroom and the selection committee, most of them much, much scarier than Lord Sugar, I have to say, offered me the job as CEO. The irony is that after 21 years as a contractor, almost to the day, I've now returned to the dark side of the force. In our new office at Dean Farrar Street, I have my own A-team with a highly talented and committed staff. Every single person at number 10 is fully focused on working for PCG members, ensuring their voices are heard, safeguarding their rights, highlighting that freelancing is a viable choice for the 21st century, reaching out to new diverse groups, and leading the way in Europe for freelancers. I'd like to thank them all for their great efforts and the tireless support for PCG and PCG members. Thank you, guys. I'd like to thank our keynote speaker tonight, Karren Brady. David Cameron has made a fantastic choice in appointing Karren as the UK's Small Business Ambassador. It strikes me that as a nation, we usually need a royal jubilee, a royal birth, a London Olympics, or even a West Ham win before we fly the flag for Britain. We're now very, sorry Karren, we're now very fortunate to have such a respected voice as Karren's taking up the cudgels for enterprise and small business in the UK. Thank you tonight, Karren. A sincere thanks to our other guests for making this NFD event such a success. The quiet, unassuming, modest, self-effacing, reticent, gentle Nick Ferrari. Thousands of the people listening to Nick's show each morning experience at least one head-twisting, he didn't actually say that moment. I do actually listen to Nick most mornings, and we used to have kind of snap, crackle, and pop for breakfast. Now, thanks to Nick, we have crack, haggle, and have a pop at anybody. So, my thanks to the incisive thoughts of Conservative rising star John Glen. Any MP who used his maiden speech to call on government to reduce unnecessary bureaucracy for small businesses is a pretty good chap. And if I lived in his constituency, I would vote for him. I don't. I live in Philip Hammond's constituency. And I might vote for him. Thanks, Liz. Consumer journalist Liz Barclay speaks so eloquently for freelancers at every opportunity, on radio, on social media, and at forums like this. Liz, I think we've worked together for a number of years now. Am I getting any better? Oh dear. After such economic unrest in London Square Mile, just down the street from here, it's a relief to have at least one Barclay that really does care about small businesses. Throughout the evening, we've been hearing about the changing jobs landscape, and the well-informed Isabel Oakeshott best highlights this. When we invited Isabel to join us at National Freelancers Day, she was political editor at the Sunday Times. And as Sue mentioned, only last week, Isabel announced she's leaving the Sunday Times to become a freelancer. Her first task is a biography of David Cameron, to be written, I understand, with Lord Ashcroft. Only the bravest freelancer would take that job on. And I think...
you should see my contract.
Yeah, you should have come to us for advice about that. So, a huge thanks to all of tonight's guests. They've been a fantastic panel, one of the most electrifying that I've listened to for a long time. Well done. Thank you. In a few moments, we will hear from a young but extremely talented singer-songwriter, Jazz Morley. So I hope you'll join me and the whole PCG team for some wine, some food, and some fabulous music up at the back there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us for what has been a stunning evening. Thank you.